Hello and welcome to KennyRoy.com. I'm Kenny Roy, and this is the lecture for June 2011. Now, this lecture actually came from an Ask Video Mail question that was sent to me, and the person had such a good question that I thought I would turn it into this month's lecture. And basically what the question was I talk a lot about testing your rigs, thoroughly testing your rigs before you start working. Now, what are the things you should be looking for when you're testing a rig? Are there things that are not good for animation that you should avoid? Are there things that, if they're in the rig, are really good and will make animation really easy? And are there just some rigs that are not ready for animation? Answer to all three of those questions is yes. And I'm going to show you how to pick those things out, not just for bipeds, but also for quadrupeds and for fantasy creatures. And hopefully it'll be very informative. Now, the first thing I want to just repeat is the entire overarching sentiment of thoroughly testing your rigs. This obviously has the main benefit of making it so that you can avoid major problems down the road. Major problems. If you are totally aware and well-versed in the rig that you've been provided, then you will avoid those problems. If you can't avoid the problems, then testing your rig gives you practice in contending with the problems. Okay? And a lot of the times, you'll be in production and they won't be able to change the rig. Or one animator's preference can't override everyone else's preferences. So if let's say there's only an FK spine and you normally only animate an IK spine, for instance. Well, you're not going to be able to make it so that they stop everything and put a IK spine in. No, you're going to have to practice with the FK spine. Okay? And then the last thing is they might actually be asking you for some rig tests. If you're an animator that is hired on early in a production, you very well may be asked to put a rig through the paces, they'd say. And so what does that mean? What does that include? Definitely like a walk and a run cycle, and then testing basically all the ranges, the range of the character, the range of motion. Okay? So there's a different range of motion for sure between a cartoony rig and a realistic rig, a biped and a quadruped, and even different bipeds. I just wrapped on Finding Bigfoot, which is a Animal Planet TV show, and the Bigfoot rig. I'm going to show you the Bigfoot rig. It is a very interesting rig because it was we used the setup machine, and the setup machine has some problems, has some major problems actually. But I knew, because I've thoroughly tested the setup machine over and over and over, I've used it so many times, that I know how to contend with those problems. But now we're starting up on animations for Mattel for their characters, the Rumblers. So these are wrestling guys. Now, what are wrestling guys going to do that Bigfoot's not going to do? Bigfoot might, walk and run and maybe, push stuff over or whatever. But the Rumblers, they're going to be doing backflips. They're going to be jumping off the ropes. They're going to have their arms way over their head and way behind their backs. They're going to get pinned. They're going to put headlocks, arm locks. Very, very, very physical. So between rigs, there's a lot of variety. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to open up about a dozen different rigs, and I'm going to go through just the basics, what you want to find out first and foremost about a rig. And this may actually help you in the short term. If you're doing tests, if you're doing 11-second club entries, then definitely this is going to help you. And I do think that if you haven't done any rig testing before, there will definitely be a little bit of a learning curve, but just stick with it, and the benefits will very quickly outweigh the kind of tedium that is rig testing. Okay, so let's start with the rig that I used for the intermediate cartoony lecture, which was last month's. His name is Groggy. I love it. I love this rig. I think it's so fun and so fantastic. And so let me tell you a couple things that I looked for when I chose this rig. I thought that I wanted a rig, first and foremost, that had stretchy legs, because I really wanted that, that running to be very cartoony, and I normally achieve that with kind of stretchy legs. This guy doesn't have it. But the first thing I looked at, and let's start looking here, the first thing that I noticed was that his feet are pointed perfectly straight forward. Okay, now why is that important? That's important because if you're going to cycle a character, you want forward motion with their feet to be one axis, the z-axis. Okay? Now the reason that is because if it's not one axis, then you have to have two axes, or sometimes three axes if it's really screwed up, all cycling with offset. And then it becomes impossible to cycle your characters correctly. If you don't know what I mean when I say cycle your characters correctly, there's an Ask Video Mail, I think it's November or December, one of those, about how to cycle characters correctly. And basically what it boils down to is, unless you know exactly, like to the number, what a stride length is of your character, you're never actually cycling your characters correctly. They will always get off. On a long enough timeline, they'll always, their feet will walk away from their body, or they'll leave their hands behind, or some problem will arise. It is way too difficult. It becomes like bookkeeping. You need a calculator by your desk just to figure it out if you are doing it in more than one axis. So feet pointing forward is absolutely important. Now, that is to say though, if there's a character whose foot, like walking position, is a little bit bowed out, like duck kind of feet, that are kind of like out a little bit, maybe a cartoony, big shoes or whatever, or rabbit feet. I had a character who had rabbit feet, that the feet were slightly tilted out. As long as that is the actual default position, and when it moves forward it's going to stay in that rotation, that orientation, then you're okay. But let's go back. So the first thing I looked at was, are the feet pointing straight forward, and is it one axis to make him start moving? And the answer was yes here. Then I move up. Okay, I grab this root control, all right, and I see what it actually controls. Okay, this has been very, very, very nicely standardized lately. Okay, and then I see where I'm going to have to click by looking over here and seeing if there are any switches, like FK and IK switches, like dynamics blends, geometry smoothing, anything over here. Okay, and then it looks like only the leg FK/IK switches are on this root control. Maybe on the ground there's some others. See, the ground only has credits and the smoothing level. Okay, so already I'm getting a sense, there looks like the switches are kind of distributed all over this mesh. That has its advantages and it has its disadvantages. The advantage of that is that when you're animating the root control, if it has all of the switches on it, then you're going to have a lot of keyframes that you have to go through and delete if you want to do a switch. And if you do a switch, you might accidentally auto key the root control in a movement. You see what I'm saying? So you're moving it through the screen, and you might introduce a hitch in the animation, depending on what your tangent curve types are, just by doing an FK or an IK switch. Okay, so the advantage of having it all spread out is that you're not going to get into that situation. The disadvantage is you have to hunt around. All right, so normally what I'll do is I'll look and say, okay, looks like this controls there's only leg IK switches on this. Let's go find the arm IK switches now. And I just so happen to remember that they're on these shoulder controls. Okay, so when I select these shoulder controls, the FK and IK switches is just like that. Okay, now let's go back down to the root. I'd like to see kind of like what this controls, but I also kind of want to just start paying attention to what kind of deformations I'm getting, especially in a character like this one who has very cartoony proportions. It doesn't look like I have a lot of room in here. I have very little room to, I mean, it's already intersecting way too badly up front. Okay, what I'll do is I'll get him into a pose. Normally you want to like try to like sit your character down and just see if you can. I'll get him into a pose where it's kind of breaking, and then I'll try to work my way out of it. So how can I get out of this? Next thing I'll select are the hips. I'll move them around first and see, okay, yeah, it does actually affect the spine. It is movable, so it is like an IK spine. Okay. But then I'll see if I can kind of I can counter rotate the hips against the pelvis, and then that gives me a little bit of room back, you know, with those knees. Maybe if I translate it, okay, there we go. All right, so I'm starting to see how I'm going to create room for these legs where I need to, okay? And this is a lot of the process of rig testing, is getting it into a little bit of a broken position and moving it out using other controls and just finding where you're going to get the room that you need. Because there'll be a time when a supervisor walks by your desks and just scribbles something on a Post-it and pops it on your monitor, and then your job is basically to copy it. Or like literally sometimes it's like hit this pose on frame 41, you know, and you got to make it happen. Okay, so I definitely do a lot of little playing with the hips. I remember when I first opened this rig, I thought of the shot before I found this rig. Okay. I remember when I first opened this rig, I spent about 15 minutes playing with just the hips, the pelvis, and the legs, just to try to see what kind of shapes I can actually get out of it. And I wasn't overly excited about the way the legs were behaving, but I loved the overall character, that I thought it would look great with the animation I thought of. So I went forward with it. But really, this is not all that fantastic control. Ideally, I would have a lot more control over the scale of the legs and the position of the knee on the legs, and this doesn't have really much of any of that. We do have leg twist, pivots, roll on the feet, and that kind of stuff, but I wouldn't be testing that now. Then I would just move up the spine. Again, I could have predicted this. I mean, there was a very IK end of the spine down there in the hips, and you know, this is behaving like normal. Now I just want to point out that this IK system, very, very, very common, but there's two different types. One is that the pelvis, or I like to call this the root, is like the place where the spine cuts off. So if I move this, it won't ever affect the what do you call this? The hips underneath, like this one is doing. And then another kind actually pulls the hips, around, actually affects the hips. And that's there. It's almost like 6 and a half dozen the other. I don't have a preference for one of those, but it's just good to know and to see and to figure out why, because you might have a crazy pose that can be explained by your IK spine pulling your hips, past your pelvis or upwards through your pelvis, and it has to do with these upper controls, not the lower ones. Okay, I'm moving right up. This behaves exactly like I predicted. I'm working with an IK spine. I just expected it to be able to walk up and get the same thing. Get a little bit of FK action, on top of it, which is great. Okay. Now, what I like to do is when I see a spine like this, I try to tell myself that I'm only going to pose it in FK and then like tweak pose and embellish with IK. I don't like to, if I want, for instance, him bent over, I wouldn't like move this down like this and then rotate it. I don't like to move it too much. So I would start by bending both of these controls and then maybe moving them both just a little bit. And then maybe fixing this weird bunch up right there somehow. See, I'm actually, this is interesting. I'm getting a little bit back into the rig testing mode right now. See, that's a ugly crease that I would definitely want to avoid, like right there. I really want to avoid that. And I remember when I was animating this guy, that this little pouch right here was a big problem. And I just had to figure out, it was a lot of rotating the hips back and counter animating the stomach control to get that to come out. Up here, the neck, one thing to note, the weights on the neck are all messed up. Okay, so this neck is not super useful. If you're good at painting weights and stuff, I guess you can go ahead and do that. But for our purposes, not really all that good to move the neck too much. I mean, just look at that. It's way out. So you just got to pay attention, and if you can paint the weights, it's not too hard to paint the weights back. I'm not going to do that for our purposes here, but just knowing that it's there. I use a lot more of the head because I found like the head actually had like the deformations that I needed, especially like in the underneath here in the chin, looked a lot better. Okay, and then definitely not getting up into the face. It's a little bit too much detail right now, but then I open the mouth and look at that. Look how little he can open his mouth before it goes right into his body. So I'm planning ahead and I'm thinking to myself, if I want his mouth to open wide, what do I need to do? I need to make sure that he's either leaned forward, okay, and his head is tilted back, okay, like that, or I need to cheat his head because his head is the very end of that IK spine, and I can just maybe move it out a little bit and move that chin, just a little bit out of the body right there. Okay, so a lot of rig testing, especially on cartoon characters, has to do with checking where the controls start intersecting and then moving them out. Arms, pretty boring. It's pretty hard to screw up FK arms, but at the same time, look how little his hands are. It's so funny. I love it. It's so funny. But at the same time, shoulders are always a problem area. You want to see what kind of rotations you have available on the clavicles and the shoulders and how they work together. This is normal, that you raise it and you get a really bad pinching here, and then hopefully when you grab those clavs up here, there you go. When you grab those clavs, you can pull it back out. Okay. And now what I noticed with this guy is that it's a little bit more stretching. It feels like a little bit more stretching upwards than actually rotating the clavicle like that. But I worked with it, and in the end, it didn't really cause too many problems. Okay, so eye controls, those work great, and then we get into the face, and the face on this guy was actually pretty fun. It's got it's got your basic in-panel, Jason Schleifer or Jason Osipa stop staring method. Oh, and one more thing to point out, by the way. I raised the arm before I raised the shoulder, but this shoulder actually raises the arm. So this is one thing that I would definitely, if I was on production and I had enough clout or I was asked to pass on notes to the riggers, I would definitely say that rotation should just affect the shoulder. I want just the shoulder to move around and not when I rotate it up like this to move the arm as well, because I can already tell there's going to be a ton of counter animation that happens in there. And it turns out there was a little bit. If you go back into seeing me demo this rig right now, if you go back into the scene file that I gave you guys from that intermediate animation, that intermediate cartoony rather, you'll see that there is a lot of counter animation going on, and I had to frame through a lot of different sections, especially when he's like bicycling his arms and whatever. So again, your basic, stop staring method with these facial controls, lower lip, upper lip. It's all wiggly giggly and pretty good. One thing that I did like was that you were able to get the lips over the teeth like that. So they're dopey like this, or they go in front. And it actually looks like it's a kind of progressive blend shape. And it's a little bit of intersection. But I really liked that because my guy had his mouth closed, and it looked good. So these are pretty darn good. I'm not sure how good the lip sync would look on this, but if you're following my lip sync workflow that I put in my lip sync lecture, then you know that really all you need is a great jaw and some really strong narrow and wide shapes, and you can get 85% there and look better than 85% of the animation that's out there. And then just some little technical things I would want to look at before I'm going too far. It looks like there's no IK on the fingers. It looks like the fingers are just FK, and they're just controlled using the using these sliders right here. Another thing to check out is to grab all of the finger controls. Grab all of them. Okay, base, mid, and tip. Base, mid, and tip. Okay, grab them all, and then. Sorry, gotta start over. Here we go. And see if dragging them all in the same direction makes a fist, or if you have to make a fist a different way. Okay, so it seems like dragging them all in the same direction does make a fist, but doesn't make that great of a fist, right? It's nice on rigs if you just drag it and it just makes just a great fist. Can't have it all. And then play around a little bit. See, it's normally thumb twist and spread that you have to use to try to get it, back in shape. Just get it up here. All right, up like this. Let's twist it. Wait, no, out like this. You know, it's always like it's always a fight with thumbs, isn't it? Here we go. There. Anyway, this guy's fingers are very dinky anyway. You can't make all that menacing a fist with these little dinky fingers, but you know, it's always good to just check it out. All right, now let's bring it together. Pinky cup. You know, so I definitely would build a fist shape and just see what kind of shape you're getting right there. And it's hilarious. Look how tiny it is. Oh, I love this rig. And then let's take a look at the feet real quick. You can pretty much, you pretty much should be able to get a total, you know, the whole total package. People haven't been really screwing up the feet either for a long time. I feel like people have just done a great job. But at any rate, rolling on the toe, you know, toe roll. This is called a lot of different things actually. You want to make sure, you want to see what having these all kind of dialed up at the same time does. Like a little bit of ball pivot and a little bit of heel pivot. That's normal, what it's doing right here. But you just want to make sure that you just have it in mind, because that little space right there may at some point, if these channels are accidentally counter animated against each other, is going to account for like the leg not hitting on the ground, even though like Y is at 0. Why is that? Oh, I just gave it away. Why is that looking like that? Another thing, this is just a quick test. Probably didn't think to do this, but select all the controls, all of them, and it might load you an object that only has like 2 channels showing, but just like click on down these objects until you find one that has more than that. All right, let me select like this. Okay, here we go. Translates and rotates XYZ, okay? So now I have them all selected, and I'm just going to go in here, and I'm just going to hit 0. Okay. So that's good, because what that means is that all of his controls are zeroed in standard pose. And that's a huge time saver when you're animating, because you may just like, wait, why is this flipping right here? Why is this working? Forget it, just zero it. But if you zero it and like it screws it up, sometimes rigs have expressions and like nested nodes that are doing math operations and whatever, and like you will screw something up and like the whole rig will candy wrapper, and you undo and the rig goes back to position, but the mesh is still screwed up. And that's a huge bummer. It's the worst. Normally what you have to do if you haven't saved the version lately, you have to export the animation and import it on a clean rig that doesn't have the geo all messed up like yours is. But definitely, always, zero, grab all the controls, zero everything, and make sure that you know, the standard rig is with everything zeroed out, okay? So now you can hopefully see why I chose this guy. He's a very dynamic spine. The legs standard, I mean, not overly, you know, overly great or anything like that, but great facial controls, really appealing proportions. A couple technical things that I really love. It was zeroed. I actually like to have the FK and IK switches distributed around the body. I don't like to go to the like root control and switch everything there, because I don't think the FK switches on the arms should be, you know, I should be seeing the FK switches on the legs at the same time or anything like that. And then the other technical thing with his feet actually pointing straight forward, and I'll show you on a rig why that's a problem. So I'm going to open up now the rig that we're using on finding Bigfoot. It was modeled by me and rigged using the setup machine. Now, if you're using the setup machine, I just want to give a quick plug. Brendan Ross, I think it's Ross. I really hope I got that right. The guy, if you go to supercrumbly.com, he has all of his Maya scripts, and he wrote AB Auto Rig. I love AB Auto Rig. It is so nice. It's got everything you need. It's got switches, FK, IK controls. You can have IK fingertips, everything you could possibly imagine. And it's super easy to use, easy to learn, and it doesn't have the problem I'm about to show you, which is having nested groups with transforms over your IK controls, okay? Which is what the setup machine does, and which is why, even though this is not the ideal, why knowing about it, I can still use the setup machine for this creature. Okay, so I'm going to, let's show you right now. Okay, so here he is. Here's Bigfoot. His hair is hidden right now, but he's got, standard, setup machine, looking controls. I edited them a little bit. I just move the CVs around on the curves to just make it fit his body just a little bit more. But basically, standard, straight up setup machine. Okay, so the problem that I was pointing out was that, all right, so let's check out these feet. All right, if I grab both legs and I grab the root, okay, and I drag it in world, okay, forward, and I'm looking up in the top right corner on the Translate Z channel. Let me drag it forward to 3.5. Okay. All right, so I've selected the body and it says 3.508. Now if I select this foot, it says 10.57. I select this foot, it says 10.57. What the heck is that? Let's go into the graph editor. Let's actually set a key. At least the setup machine actually zeroes out the controls. That's one nice thing about it. Okay. Oops, forgot to set a key. Okay, here we go. So if we go into the graph editor, check this out. Okay, here's my body, here's my body, Translate Z, and here are the two Translate Z's on my my feet. See, there's one behind this one. What is up with that? Well, the reason is you can actually tell. So check this out. You select the foot. This is what you do when you notice that. If you walk upwards, walk up the high read by just hitting the up key, you start seeing the groups that are that are the parent of the control you just selected. So this one already, right leg direction compensate. I'm not sure what that is. It must be created in the rigging process to compensate for the right leg direction. I don't know what that's supposed to do, but it has a rotation of -90. Up again, oh my God, look at this. Right leg IK null. It's translated 0.416 in X, blah, 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 in Y and Z. I'm not sure what that is. And then up here, here's the culprit. Here's a right leg IK group. And it has crazy translations in X, Y, and Z. It's rotated 90 in X, 89.556. Obviously, 89.556 has something to do with trying to prevent a gimbal lock, because 89.556 is not exactly 90. It's probably right up until I'm not sure why they felt the need to do that instead of just give some good standardized rig tools. And then scale 0.332. 0.332. Okay, so if we look at this, 5.458. And this is 16.443. I'm just going to run calculator. 16.443 divide by 0.332. Oops. 0.332. One more time. 16.443, 332, 5.45. So there's this one group that is actually scaling the transforms down on the feet, making it so that they're translating a completely different amount. Now, if you're used to just doing all your cycles in panel, then this might not be a big deal for you. But if you're like me and you like to plant your foot and see like, oh, it's 5.5 units, and then copy that to every other IK control. If you're using IK arms, you copy it to both arms, left arm, right arm, onto the hips, onto the other foot, anything that's IK. If you have, I don't know, maybe IK pole vectors that don't travel with the body, you can copy onto that. I just like to know that everything is translating in the exact same object space or world space coordinates. So this is a problem. Another problem is this. Because there was a little bit of rotation, 89.553, check this out. I'm moving it just in Z, and look, there's some translate Y on this control. I'm moving it in world, okay? So I'm not moving it in object, I'm moving it in world. Ostensibly, if I change it from object to world, yep, see that? See that little bit? Here, I'll make it even bigger. Okay. World, watch this little axis handle down here. Object, world, object. So that's a problem, okay? If I like the setup machine because it's really quick. It's like one button and you have like a character that's like really easy to tweak and paint weights, and it's fast and it's easy to copy animation between setup machine rigs. So it's got a lot of advantages. The disadvantage is that you will pretty much never, I'll give you $1,000 if you can show me a mathematically perfect cycle on using the setup machine. Okay, so anyway, that's just one thing to consider. Another thing is, as you can see here, this guy's rig is basically the hips or the pelvis is above the root, just like in space. That's the way it's automatically created. But it doesn't look like anything that you do in the upper spine can really affect the lower spine there. Okay. Cool. So that's one technical issue. Let's open up another one. Excuse me. Let's take a look at a quadruped rig. I got a cough. Sorry. All right. So let's run through the paces again. What would you want to do with a dog rig? This is basically a dog. Well, you'd want to walk it. You'd want to cycle it. Let's see. Okay. His main controller is actually up here. It's this little diamond shape, but it actually grabs this the pivot point is inside his body. So you have to grab it up here. Okay. So let's just check it out. Let's grab his IK feet. Let's grab his thing, move it all forward. It looks like there's a point at that his head is going through, but that's not a big deal right now. We're not looking at that. All right, let's see. Translate Z 47.961. Translate Z 47.961. Translate Z 39.169. This is even worse. Oh, and the right foot is 28.26. Oh my word. Let's step up here and figure out why this is. All right, there's rotations on this one and there's different rotations. See, that's the problem. This one, these are both underneath groups that have different rotations on it. So this is even worse than the setup machine. If you're doing a cycle with this guy, you'd be even worse shape, okay? You want to see what we only moved it forward in world Z. That's all we did. I grabbed it and I moved it, I changed it to world and I moved it forward in Z. And look at these values here. 38.742 on X, 0.89 on Y, and negative 28.26 on Z. And on this one, negative 27.6 in X, negative in Y, and 39. The numbers aren't even the same. Even if you wanted to like multiply it by -1 just to get the number in your head, you couldn't do it. So this rig is terrible. Terrible for doing any kind of animation where you need to keep things in mind. Now, if you're just animating in panel, having him gallop up and land, and you're just fixing it in panel and whatever, that's fine. This rig is totally fine. But I would never, I wouldn't, this is too far gone for me to use this in production. I would never use this in production. Okay, let's do the zero. Let's zero him out. Let's do a zero test. I'm grabbing everything. Let's find a control that actually has some, geez. All right. All right, well, there's another way you can do that. If you don't want to mess with the rotates and whatever, you can go into the general editor and then attribute spreadsheet, and then you can just drag across here and hit 0 and enter, and it'll zero everything. Okay, so let me do that when he's actually, you know, let's put some values on him, and so you can actually see what's going on. Grab all of these, translate X, Y, Z, 0, enter, and he snaps back. Okay, so at least he's zeroed, but he's really not in good shape for anything nice. And now, again, you might have noticed, look at these feet, how far they're pointed outwards. If I want him to walk forward, I have to rotate his feet first. I mean, and not like his channels weren't going to be messed up anyway, but now they're even more messed up just because I have to put some rotation on his foot controls just to get them to point forwards. So this guy's in bad shape. Going through the rest, you know, just looking for little things. They're trying to do a lot of fancy kind of, you know, IK in the spine. There might be a few too many controls in here. Yeah, I mean, this is a little bit too much control, I would say. Okay, but for the things that we were looking for, it's already failed a couple tests. So I'm not sure if this guy is animation ready. You know, he's already failed a few of the important ones, a few of the technical ones. Looks like an FK tail. Does not look like you can change that. That's okay. 5 controls on FK tail is super manageable. So I wouldn't be worried about that. And it looks like switches are, where are switches? These are the pole vectors. You can make them follow the hand or the foot. Twist. Is this a shoulder? Yeah, this is shoulder. I actually do not see any, this is interesting. I actually do not see any switches on him. Yeah. So he might just be an IK rig. And the last thing I just want to point out, look at his body position. Shouldn't he be a little bit more unbalanced? You know, like something like that. But when you do that, look what happens. There's this crazy pinching right here in the geometry. I'm going to turn up the geometry level. And you can see it gets this crazy pinch right here. See, this is how he was rigged, like forward like that. And see how it pinches up really badly in here? So that was another oversight. So I'm not too impressed with this rig. Let's move on. Now we're going to open up a bomb diggity quadruped rig. This is Neko. Neko is available for free on creativecrash.com, and there's some really nice animations, some inspiring animations. I think he was given out, I think he was created for like a contest, maybe in 3D World. Not quite sure. But let's just start with, you know, what we should start with. Let's move these things all around. Let's grab them all. Let's go translate, rotate, zero them out. Boom, he snaps back. I mean, this is a great rig, so we're not going to find any problems with him. Although, look at that, the face control panel just, you know, snap back to world origin. It defaults near the front of his face right here. And okay, so that we can forgive that. Let's grab the body. Let's select these IK feet. Oops. Let's move it all forward in Z. 273, 207, 273, 207, 273, 207. Everything is as it should be. Beautiful. I am so happy when I see that. Oh yes. Oh yes. Neko has an FK and an IK spine, but instead of being a hybrid spine, okay, you actually have both of the control set showing at the same time. So it's actually kind of cool. I like that, because now I can be like, oh, definitely that's the rotations in the FK spine, and it's not, you know, the IK spine is not moved off, right? So I think that's actually pretty darn cool. The hips right here. One thing to notice is that the tail is isolated, meaning the tail is pointing the same direction no matter where the hips go, but it does look like these tail point controls don't move with the tail. I'm sure you can change that though. Tail FK spline, let's see what that does. Does that turn these on? Yeah, that turns these on. And I bet you that they go, yeah, see, they stick with this thing. You just have to turn that on. Okay. One extra nice thing, I said that there's some extra super nice things that are great to have. I don't see this too often. I see it like half and half, I would say. Half and half with the, you know, with the, the rigs I see in production or whatever. And it's this. It's that when you move the back legs, there's a parallel rule. Basically, the femur, this bone has to stay parallel to the foot. This is the heel, okay? This is the foot bones, and these are just the toes, right? So the femur and the foot always need to be parallel in 99% of situations with a quadruped. Now, if you're moving your leg around and it stays like that kind of naturally, like this one does, you're in great shape, okay? Some of them don't. And I don't know why, because it's actually easier to make a system where they stay relatively parallel, okay? You only have to do a little bit of, and in the extremes, of course, back here, you know, it's not parallel now, of course, but it is right there. And then it is, and then kind of, you know, once that foot starts extending, like so it kind of is right here, but then it's not. So, but that's fine. Pretty much in almost all of the comfortable range of motion for this foot, you have parallel femur and foot, which will save you a lot of work down the road. Not every rig is like that. It's surprising. Another thing to check out with quadruped rigs is how much toe control do you have? Because it's nice when you have the feet come off in your like 1% super polished pass to have the toes really like, you know, feel like they come off the ground and feel like this, you know? So if you don't have that control, which the dog didn't, I didn't show you, I'm sorry, but the dog didn't, and I'll show you a few more where they don't, but this one does. So you have everything that you could possibly want. You have heel raise, okay, you've got heel twist, pivot on the toe, okay, which is kind of the opposite of you know, the pivot point back here. I'm not sure why you'd use that. But you also have these individual toe controls. This is great. Check this out. You can move them up and down. You can, whatever, you can spread them apart. All right, I love that. And then you have these little bends, mid and tip. It's weird. Their curl is Z, but whatever, we'll forgive them. I like it to be X. And this is the shape that you really want to have. This is extra super nice on a quad. It's so, look, how sexy is this when, you know, it lifts off and that foot, you know, is like that. And then, you know, on that 1%, you know, super polished pass, you even have them, you know, as they come off, you know, they kind of move together a little bit like that. And then they kind of, you know, come in like that. Oh, so good. Love it. I'm going to grab it and I'm going to zero it all again. Which is fantastic. It all goes back. Test with the quad. The other guy had pole vectors, but I only showed you the wolf because it's a bad one, and I didn't want to belabor, you know, I didn't want to show you too much on the wolf because it's a bad one. But this guy's great. He's got these really neat pole vector controls, and why I like them is that they kind of isolate to the single bone, which is bad if you know are using them too often, but it's really good if you need to do some finite or really minute, I don't know why I said finite, really minute details on the legs. Like if you're doing like this dog like rolling down the hill or whatever, you'll be dying trying to counter animate an ankle that can only rotate with the foot, and counter animating it against a pole vector that only rotates with the knee. So you'll be like, okay, I want this ankle over here, so I have to move it over here and then grab the knee pole vector and crank it all the way back. It's such a pain in the butt. So this is super awesome finite control. And this control is not only a pole vector that can move it back and forth, but it also extends the ankle or flexes the ankle. All right, so this is a great control for when, let's say you move it, you know, let's say back here where the, you know, where you start going off of parallel right there, just to grab it and make a little bit, see right there, just get it back into parallel again. Okay, we went over the spine. Also really good to see, just see if you have translation and rotation in your clavicles. You probably want to do much more translation than you want to do actually rotation. When that animal comes down and puts the weight on, you probably want to translate it. So Neko is just so rad. It's such a great rig. I'm very happy with it. This little pole vector does the same thing. Okay. This is a jaw control. He has actually really nice face, and I've always loved this. This is another super extra nice thing that you don't get with most rigs, but if you look at his eyelid geometry, it actually kind of conforms and feels like it sticks with the eyeball point, which always just feels so good. It just always feels so fleshy and realistic and organic. He's got an amazing amount of controls in his face, especially for a fantasy creature. These blinks, eyelid control, squint, cheeks. This is like a motion, you know, downwards, nose, nostril flare, another flare control. What's this? Oh, that's like the position of the nostril. I'm not sure when you'd ever use most of these, but we've got a little bit of brow furrowing. This is probably angry. So if you combine this with this, yeah, you get like an angry shape. Just really nice control, really great. This panel moves around. You can get that out of the way if you want, or constrain it to a camera. This is the right amount of neck controls. 1 IK shaper on top of 3 FK joints. That's the perfect amount. I really like that. And then you have a head, 2 head movers. Now you want to find out how these work with each other. This ISO controller probably is the one you want to rotate if your head is on isolation. meaning like if you twist your body, your head stays the same direction. Okay. Overall, just great rig. And you can see that it stood up against all of our tests. You know, zeroing it out, testing the world space. Did it have controls, you know, on the feet and the tail and the spine where we need it? And just really great. My one caveat with this rig is that I haven't found how to reduce the geometry, and I'm not sure, that's not too many polys, but it might be a little bit slow on some people's system. It doesn't look like quite the lightest rig in terms of geometry, but I don't know, that's a small caveat. So a great rig. Let's look at another one. Okay, this next one is another example of a wacky quad rig. This is a Triceratops, also available on Creative Crash. Now you might think that it's super cool to animate a Triceratops. Indeed, it is a really cool character just in general. There were Triceratops in Kong before the sequence was cut, and I was really bummed because I had 3 awesome shots. And I was happy for people to see them. But this rig, you should just download this rig and take a look at it because it is almost like a lesson in craziness. So you don't have any control over the rotation of the ankles, but you can move them up and down, and that's it. That's it. Literally, there's a translate Y channel on these, and that's all on the ankle. You can rotate these and move them, but there is no there's no other controls besides that. If you if you drag this close, that right there is supposed to be all the, you know, toe curl that you get from this creature. Maybe Triceratops were like, maybe their back legs were, you know, stiff like an elephant's, or, you know, maybe they didn't move very much. But man, I don't know. I would rather have a little bit too much control and have to rein it in to make it more realistic than have it so super constrained that I can't screw anything up. And then just things get really weird here. Not in the main controller, but like the hip. These bones are not rigid bound to the skeleton, so there's a lot of weird weighting issues. I mean, obviously that won't fly. The tail as well. Not only are there weird weighting issues, but it looks like their IK spline was, I mean, like, watch this vertebrae right here. When I move it, it actually goes past, you know, the other ones. So that's weird. I'm not even sure how you'd go about doing that. And then the same thing over here. We're losing so much volume in the tail. So a lot of weighting problems on this guy. And I haven't even done this yet, but I'm curious to see if all of his controls actually move in world space together. 14.79, 14.79, 14.98. Oh, okay, that was a different control. Okay, so at least it works with everything, you know, in world space, but that's small potatoes compared to weighting issues and total lack of control on the legs. Okay, here's an elephant rig. This elephant rig is decent. I would definitely say that this one is, you know, could be used in production on animation, but you know, it's a little bit cartoony. It's lacking a lot of detail. Some good shape in the eye. You know, like up here, like if we look just right here, it's got some good shaping, and the geometry looks pretty darn good. Again, it's a little bit heavy. It's not the lightest on geometry. I like to have my stuff pretty low poly. I'm not sure if you saw how low poly that Bigfoot rig was, but we subdivide like 5 times at render time anyway. So why not have a rig that's super slim? Let's do it one more time. Grab all of his controls, grab his main mover, move in world space, and check it. 58.68, 58, 58, 58, 58. Okay, good. Let's check out, see what these moves are doing. Okay, so this is the other kind, the other type. Neko has that FK, IK spine where the different controls are sitting there, but you move him with his main mover. This guy, it is very tempting to actually just move him using these two controls. And the only thing that I would say is that you really want to try to train yourself to use the main controllers to move quadrupeds. It might seem easier, especially if you have to have him like turn a corner, like go around a corner like this, and then he walks up, and then the butt finishes, and now he's walking. Oops. Now he's walking this way. Blah 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 off there, right? So that might be a lot easier to do than to try to counter animate and negotiate him going like around a corner. So that doesn't look very good, and you can already see how like, oh man, if he has to turn a corner like that, then I'm going to be counter animating against him swinging so wide. The problem is that a lot of some very funky things can happen to bones and rigs when you get too far away from your parent, and especially when you get rotated too crazily underneath your parent. So you want this one controller to be doing a lot of at least the Y rotations. If he's falling over on the ground, you can get him into position using this translate. You can point him the right direction using the rotate right there. If he needs to fall on the ground, there's no reason you can't have him boom, use these controls to bam, and rotate him over, down onto the ground like that. No reason you can't do that. But you don't want to get stuff too far away from in translation or rotation from that main control. Okay, let's check the pull vectors on the knees. Some pretty. It's more the geometry that's kind of doing that. Very little control here on the feet. If you wanted anything like rocking back and forth or anything, you just have to do that by hand. And then looks like all we get is a oh no, it says spline FK trunk. Interesting. So here's the trunk, just FK. I don't know. Oh, and here it just turned to IK. Well, that's nice. That'll work. Test the jaw. See if we're getting any weird penetrations or anything like that. One thing to note, if you see these ears, bet you when I rotate this head back, yeah, see it intersects really quickly. One thing you might want to do is just make a note for yourself that whenever you're posing the head, to just do yourself a favor and pose the ears just out of the body, at the same time. Just do yourself a favor. Don't even, just get them out. And then when you're going back into your scene, I have a key on, every single time there's a key on my head, I have a key on my ears, and it's just getting the ears out of the body. And that way you don't have to go back through and pull them out and and animate them through again. So I prefer to kind of set myself up for, having an easier time later than going back and doing pass after pass after pass of fixing, because it ends up being too much. I think it's a lot easier to look at a character and say, okay, if I pose the head, I pose the ears, whatever. What is there to remember? There's nothing to remember. But you do have to remember to, like, let's say there's the same thing with the tail. Let's say there's only an isolation tail. And let's say that he has no, elephants don't really follow the parallel rule. But if it's a dog, okay, parallel rule. It's always getting off the parallel. Okay, all right, so now I have to go back through my animation, do an ear pass, do a tail pass, do a parallel rule pass on all four, well, actually the two back legs, etc. You see how it can get a little bit too inundating? So that's what I would say. Now, I want to show you a facial rig. I want to show you two different facial rigs. Okay? These are the last two things I'm going to show you. The first one is one I use in the lip sync lecture that I have. Okay? And it is by Paxton Garish from characteroutsource.com. And the one thing that I want you to notice about it is that it is an in-panel deformer and curve-based facial system. Now, every single time you see a system like this, you know that you have crazy amount of control. And the rig testing you need to do with this is actually to simplify down in your mind rather than like really run it through its paces, okay? Because you will very, very quickly start getting into really mushy, soupy, way over animated lip sync if you don't simplify this down. So in following the exact same lip sync workflow every single time, what do we know? We know that we need open, closed, and narrow, wide. Those are our first two passes in that order. Open, close, narrow, wide. Open, close, narrow, wide. Okay? So let's try to find it. Okay, now this moves the lips. This is the dopest rig ever. He's got so much smushiness. It's so nice. All right, so that wasn't it. Let's try this. Okay, that only opens the lips. That's not it. All right, let's try this. All right, up and down. Up, there it is. Okay, so my jaw control is actually translate, which is unique. It's interesting because of how, you know, normally it's rotation, but and I love this guy. Look at when his lips smush together. There's actually a little bit of, you know, pressing together right there. I love that. Yeah, just fantastic work. And we can see, just look at all those little controls. Every single one of those little controls is moving. It's so fleshy. You can actually move them in finite, or why do I keep on saying finitely? Is that what I mean? Is that the right word? Minutely control them. Anyway, so there we go. All right, so now that I have my open close, let's find my narrow wide. Oh, there it is. So here's my wide, you know, for E shapes and wide shapes, like S and T. And then here's my narrow. Here's my ooh shape. Ooh. All right, so it's interesting. Open, close, and narrow, wide. It's actually only 3 controls. See these 3? That's what you want to do. When you get a facial rig, you want to find those 3 controls, and you know, 80% of your job is done. Don't get fancy because you've been given a lot of leeway. And this last one I want to show you is another awesome rig. It's actually Dobby from Harry Potter. Someone, I guess a fan of Harry Potter, created this scene or created this rig, and it's super versatile. Oh, looks like all of his textures need to be remapped. But at any rate, you know, he's got his little nappy on, and he's actually really nicely laid out. One thing that I would definitely test right off the bat is make sure that, you know, that shoulder thing, because his arms were rigged a little bit downwards. Let's see what happens with this clavicle. Raise it up, it gets that, you know, categorical pinch right there. Let's try rotating this up. Okay, see, that's a little bit ugly. Can we translate it? No, we can't. So this one is not too good with in terms of the shoulder shapes. Could use a lot of work. But in terms of facial, this is probably one of the most detailed facial setups I've seen, and this is the back to the good old, you know, stop staring method. But it has a lot of that fleshiness. You'll see here, you know, with the shapes. And where is the? And then the eyes move around. They still have that the lid moving with them, which I really love. Let's turn the smoothing up. There we go. And the eyebrows, same thing. These are really nicely detailed blend shapes, and it looks like there's some corrective blend shapes on top of these. Interestingly enough, the one animation that's on Creative Crash for this guy is not that great. It's good, but it's not like stellar. Oh my god! And the lip sync is not quite that great. So I might actually try to animate with this guy. I just wanted to show you like a really nicely created one with really cool blend shapes on a nice looking character. I wonder how he. You know what? This looks like AB auto rig. In fact, yes, I'm almost positive this is AB. I can tell from the shape of the controls that it made. So I already know that this is going to cycle perfectly. Let's see here, 34619, 34608. How'd that happen? Uh-oh. Let's see here. All right. So look at that. All right, this is not supposed to happen. This is interesting. I just found that it looks like I bet you it works now though. 4504, 4504, 4504. All right, so they added something onto this rig that actually made it so it doesn't cycle anymore. Well, that's not good. Anyway, but you can you can actually account for that. It's just a pain in the butt. So this is not ready for cycling, surprisingly enough, even though it's just an awesome, oh, look at that belly button. And it's just an awesome facial rig. Not quite ready for game day, but still really nice. Okay. Well, that will pretty much do it, okay? You want to make sure that your rig is not going to technically fight you. What that means is that you want to make sure that the feet are pointing forward, that if you zero out the controls, that they're going to go back to their origin or where their home is. You want to make sure that you don't have controls that are fighting each other. On AB Auto Rig, for instance, the FK and the IK wrist rotations are visible at the same time. So you need to decide which one you're going to use, okay? See, this one rotates it, and also this one rotates it. So it's two different rotations. I know Bishop is like that from Animation Mentor. So it's a little bit dangerous, so you always have to make sure you know which controls you're going to be using. Find the FK and IK switches. I like them not on the root if possible, but some rigs have them there. See if you can cycle your character by moving it all forward and then checking like the translate Z, or checking all the controls. If there's any information on any other control but the one you just moved, then you're going to have technical problems down the road when you try to cycle the character. When you're moving up and down the character, when you move up to the shoulders, put the arm up in the air and then see if the clavicle actually gives you back the shape that you want. It's difficult. Shoulders are a real problem area for everybody. So, I mean, it's not the end of the world that this one doesn't look too great. It just means that he can't put his arms, way over his head, or it'll just look weird. And then back down here in the feet, looking for things like toe rolls and foot splay and things like that. You just want to make sure everything again has. It is standardized. If it's, a lot of, finger controls, you'll grab all of them and the fingers will go like this, but then the thumb will bend backwards like that. They'll go like opposite direction, like that. Oh, that's hard to do. Wait. You just need to account for that. So it's then it's good to put your characters into poses. Try to break the rig like I did in the beginning with Groggy. Sit him down and just like try to find how am I going to get that range back underneath his body where his knees are just like folding up. How am I going to find that range? And you know, it's as simple as just playing around and finding like, you know, the hip controls on Groggy. And it's different with every character. You know, you're going to have, you know, difficulties with every single rig, and it's just a matter of putting in the time to figure it out. After you put it through a pose, you know, a couple different poses and break it and kind of bring it back to life, then it's time to do some animation. And certainly a walk cycle is where you should start. I would recommend getting your walk cycle workflow down to a science so that you can cycle a character in like 2 hours. That might seem like, what? But it's not unheard of for the industry, okay? And then after that, maybe some you know, small little, again, 24 frames to 72 frames. Just little tests that exemplify the motions the character's going to go through. So I'm about to start a project with wrestlers, and they're going to be lifting each other, and just body slamming. You know, I might do just a little bit of animation just to see, you know, how my deforms are looking and stuff like that. Okay. This was a really great question. I'm very excited about the prospect of getting more lecture ideas and lecture topics from you guys. Put them in the forum that's labeled resource wish list if you want to see a lecture in your sure. And you guys, I know you've voted on a couple lectures that I'm sure you're hotly anticipating. And I am planning on doing all the ones that everyone has lent their support for. I can always use more topics. And also send your questions into the Ask Video mail, because that is the best way to get the most value out of the site. It's like literally having a mentor, because what I wanted to do with this site, let me just give you a look. All right, let's cue the violin music. I had a mentor, and her name was Jen, and I met her when I was apprenticing at ILM, and basically I would bother her all the time, and she would, whatever she was doing, sometimes she'd say she was too busy, but pretty much almost every single time she would stop and show me something for like 15 minutes. And she's like, oh, this is what I would do, or let's just take a look at this piece of animation, or whatever. And just like 15 minutes like made the world of difference to me. And so what I've wanted to do with this site is make it a place where if you have like a burning question, or you're just stuck, that you can almost come into my office and ask me, what do you do with this? And I can show you the way that my mentor showed me. I really want this to be a very personal experience. So, you know, so please take advantage of the Ask Video Mail, because it's a great resource if you take advantage of it. And some people have had like 3 questions answered, and they're so lucky, because I mean, you know, they're hogging all the questions. Like, come on, give everyone else a chance or something. Okay. This has been fun. If you want to find all of these rigs, they're available on creativecrash.com. I don't include the rigs in the downloadable zip files with the lectures, because the rigs are not marked for redistribution. That one, I don't think that'd be fair for me to give them out. So you got to find them yourself, but it's not too hard. They're right there. Okay. So thank you to everybody. Thank you for your support. I'm still having just a blast doing the site, and I hope it goes on forever, and I hope we all just live and learn and grow together. Okay? Good luck with your animation. And as always, rock on.